What's going on, everybody? James here from Artificial Entertainment, and today I'm going to show you how to be able to integrate the Dynamic Parkour Trace System into the game animation sample project. So let's go ahead and dive in. So we have here a fairly fresh version of the game animation sample project. I did add the Dynamic Parkour Trace System as well as an asset pack of parkour animations, just so everything we needed was right here. Now, before we go too much further, there's a couple of things that I do want to point out. The first is that we are going to be removing the traversal system that is inside of this by default and using this instead. So we're not going to be kind of combining the two together. We're going to be getting rid of what they did and kind of overriding it with the Dynamic Parkour Trace Systems version of things. The other thing that I want to point out, though, is that we are going to be going through some of the basic setup, but I'm going to be going through it pretty quickly. And that's primarily because if you're looking for more information about the setup and stuff, all of that I have videos specifically on. I'm going to be mainly focusing on the changes and adjustments needed to get things working inside of this project. So let's go ahead and get things started. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to open up the character for the game animation sample project, and that's located in the blueprints folder. You can see it right here, CBP sandbox character. So we'll double click and open this up. Now from here, we do need to add the Dynamic Parkour Trace System into the actual character. So we're going to go to the Components tab here at the top left, click on Add, and type in Dynamic, and you'll see it right here, Dynamic Parkour Trace System. So once we add that in, we'll just compile really quickly. And then we're also going to go up to the class settings here, and we're going to add under the Implemented Interfaces section, DPTS underscore BPI. This is the primary interface for the actual Dynamic Parkour Trace System. So now that that's all in place, we're just going to go ahead and set up the basic function events. So now I will say there is no event begin play inside of the sandbox character, so we do need to add one. So that's one adjustment that we do have to do, but that's a pretty basic one. Now we'll just go ahead and get a reference to our parkour system there, and then we're going to set the initial references, and then we'll hook that into begin play, and then off the character reference, just get a quick reference to self. And like I said, I am going through this a little quicker, but these are all things that I cover inside of the actual setup video if you are looking for more information. Now, the movement input event that we do in the initial setup is going to go here. Now, there's two different movement inputs for the actual sandbox character. This one I found to be relatively useless. So I disconnected and just put it off to the side. You can delete it, do whatever you want. But this is the primary one that we want. Now, the way that I've done this is by moving this back, and we're just going to get the actual action event here, and we're going to pull off the action value, and we're going to break the vector 2D. So this way we get the X and the Y. And then from here, we can right click and do adjust the input direction using the function. And then as you can see here, we have for the X, this is going to be the left and right, and the Y is going to be the forward and back. So we can go X, left, right, Y, forward, back. And then we're also going to grab a reference to our parkour component in there. And for the actor reference, we're just going to get a reference to self. And then we'll hook triggered up into there, and then we're going to delete all of this because we don't need any of that. We just need the add movement input, and then we'll let the updated system actually control the world direction and scale value as well. Now we'll just take these, move them in a little bit, grab another reference to the Dynamic Parkour Trace System, pull off, and we're going to get the movement input, just like this. And then we'll hook up left, right, into left, right, and forward, back, into forward, back. All right, so now that we got all the base things there, now we just need to add the function for the actual locations for motion warping. So we're just going to go up to the Functions tab, add a new function, add or update warp target, and then we're going to click on the input here, and then we're going to add one input, change it to a transform, and then add 3 more. And then just set the usual warp 1, warp 2, warp 3, warp 4, and then we're going to go ahead and split the struct of each of these transform pins. And we're just doing this by right-clicking on the actual pin there, and then just split struct pin. Now, thankfully, the sandbox character already comes with motion warping added into it. So we need to find that in the components list here, and drag it into our graph, pull off, and do the add or update warp target. And then the warp target struct pin here, we're going to right-click and split struct pin. So now this gives us an add or update warp target, but we'll just highlight this, duplicate it, so this way we have 2 of them. And then we'll take both of these and duplicate those, so now we have 4 of them. Now the reason why we want 4 is because the system comes with 4 different locations, so this way it makes it easy. And then we're just going to go location and rotation into each respective warp. And again, I'm just going through this kind of quickly because this is all the standard setup that you would do regardless if you're using the GASP animation project or if you're using, just your own startup template. Now we're just going to quickly name the warp targets warp 1, warp 2, warp 3, and then warp 4. And then we'll compile and save and go back to the event graph, go to the My Blueprint area, under Interfaces, go to the Primary Events, and double click on where it says Send Warp Locations. This way we can get this function. Now this here is going to be what we take the outer update warp targets and plug this in like so. So this is all still where, we're still basically doing the standard setup like we would do if we were setting it up any other way. So from here, what we're going to do is how you set this up ultimately depends on how you want to have your input set up. If you want to use the standard jump input the same way that the game animation sample project's traversal system is set up, you can. You just want to make sure that you use jump input inside of the actual system settings by just clicking on the Dynamic Parkour Trace System here, going into the action modification settings, and clicking on use jump input. As long as that's true, then you don't even have to worry about the jump in there. Now we're going to go ahead and actually find the jump input itself. So you can see jump/traverse jump, or jump/traversal input. I'm going to close the menu here, and we're going to actually take all of this off. Now, if you're not using the jump input that's built into the Dynamic Parkour Trace System, you can go ahead and just take off up to here. Leave the jump itself, but I'm going to go ahead and take everything off, including jump, because we're going to set this up using the jump input. But I just want to note that you can also use custom inputs if you want. So we're going to go and just grab a reference to the parkour system, pull off, and just go execute trace, just like that. And then off it triggered, go ahead and set that just like that, and compile and save. So now we have everything we need to be able to set things up. From here, all we need to do is just go ahead and actually add in our action events. So if we go into the interface, action events, and we're going to do a standard vault just to kind of demonstrate the practice here. So if we go ahead and get the event vault, we're actually also going to look for a play montage node by just right-clicking and type play montage. And then in the component section here, we're going to grab our mesh, hook it into the in-skeletal component here, hook this up like this. And then for the enumeration off of these functions here, we can drag off and get a select node. These are really good for being able to have like a bunch of different things that something can do and have it switch based off of just one specific value, or in this case, an enumeration. So we're going to take the return value here, plug it up into the montage to play, put this back a little bit, and we'll leave this blank for right now, as we need to go and actually get an animation. Now, the reason why I saved this part as well to show you guys is to show you how easy it is to be able to use your own animations for traversal. You don't have to use the ones that come with the actual game animation sample project, because they're a little finicky and they could be some of them can be difficult to work with if you're just using a standard type of expected system. But, again, you can do whatever you want. There's no restrictions. I mean, animations are yours. To do what you want with. My system doesn't necessarily impact animation. It just allows you to use any ones you want. But if we go ahead and open up the parkour animations folder here, go to animations, and we're going to look at the UE5 skeleton ones, because this makes it very easy for us to be able to just easily assign them. So what we're going to do from here is just look for the vault folder, and we're going to look for the monkey vault, because that is one of my personal favorites. So we're going to just take this, we're going to drag it over to our content browser and copy it. Now, the reason why I like to do this is because, granted, normally I would have a folder for this, but I'm just using this one animation, so there's no reason to create a folder for all that. But anyways, so from here, what we can do, though, is we can just right-click on it, and then we're going to look for where it says Replace Skeleton, and we're going to look for UEFN. And you'll see this one here, SKUEFN mannequin. This is actually the skeleton that's being used for the sandbox character. So we can go ahead and assign that skeleton to this animation, and there we go. Now we got that assigned, and we got this animation with that skeleton. Now, I will say this only works for animations that are for the UE5 skeleton. If you're using UE4, you do have to do the retarget, but even retarget's one click, so not really that big of a deal. Now, we do want to make sure that root motion is enabled, so we're going to look for root and enable root motion, click on save, and then we're just going to right-click, and we're going to create anim montage. Open it up, and we're going to do just really quickly, we'll do the usual, where we'll go right-click, notify state, motion warping, look for right about where he's, kind of at his middle point. And again, I do have videos going over kind of the finer points of setting up the motion warp targets and all that stuff, but I'm just kind of, again, doing this to kind of demonstrate using it with the game animation sample project. But now from here, we can go ahead and just set the motion warp window information. So we're going to click on this and then just go up to the details panel. Here's by this, I mean the actual window itself. So the warp target name, we're going to set this one to warp 1. Ignore Z axes, we're going to uncheck that. And then for warp or for the next window here, we're going to set this to warp 3. So this is going to be the kind of landing location, and again, ignore z-axes. Now, before we can close out the animation, we also want to right-click, add notify, reset parkour action right there. So we're going to put that right about there, and then save. So now that we have this set up here, what we can do is I'm going to make sure it's highlighted in my content browser, go back to the sandbox character here because I got the tab open still, and then I can just look at where it says vault over short and click this little arrow, and it'll put that right into there. Now, one thing that we do need to do, though, is make sure that this action is allowed. So we're going to go to the Dynamic Parkour Trace System really quickly, and we're going to look at under the ground action settings, vault actions, allowed actions, and make sure that short distance vault, which I'll expand this here so you can see, make sure this is checked. So long as that's checked, what we can do is compile and save, and we'll click on play. I can go up to any one of these objects here. I wish they put them a little bit closer, but that's okay. And if I hit the space bar, you can see that he does the monkey vault now. And he does do a nice little land. And, you can fine tune these windows, make things move a little bit faster, maybe move the landing location a little further back. You can play with things however you want. But ultimately, the setup is ultimately exactly the same. Now, where things change is when we start doing climbing. This is where certain overrides do need to be put into place. So this is where we're going to start talking about some changes that we're going to make outside of just removing the traversal section of the input. So when you're climbing on a ledge inside of the system, what's going to happen is the rotation gets disabled. However, if we look at here under the event tick section, there's an update rotation, and this happens every single tick. And if we double click and open this up, you can see that it's looking for the wants to strafe variable. However, we want to have rotation disabled on a tick based at least during climbing. So the easiest way to do this is to go to the My Blueprint section, and then we're going to look for, the components section, and then look for the Dynamic Parkour Trace System. And we're going to grab a reference, pull off, and look for the active climb style. So we're going to get that and see by pulling off and see if the enum is equal to none. If it's equal to none, then we're going to go through and just let it do its standard thing. So because that basically just means that we're not currently climbing. We're just kind of, we're on the ground or we're doing something that, rotation is okay. However, if it's not equal to none and we are doing a climbing state, we don't want it to do anything. So we want to make sure that we disable this whenever we are actually climbing. Now, one of the other things that you're going to probably want to do is for a lot of the climbing states, in the climbing setup video, I displayed how to be able to set them up using the blend poses by enumeration inside of a state machine. And realistically, I can't really see a lot of use for the actual specific motion matching, unless you have a lot of different animations with different sorts of like velocity, kickoffs, and things like that. A need for motion matching with these types of traversal actions. So ultimately, I do recommend using a state machine, and I'll show you how to be able to do that right now. So in the climbing setup video, like I said, we had set up things utilizing the switch there. But inside of the motion warping project here, if I go, where is it? Blueprints, the sandbox character animation blueprint, which is, minimize, this one right here. So if I go ahead and open this up here, you're going to see that there's a lot going on here. We got the motion matching, we've got, some additive lean stuff, root offsets, a whole bunch of stuff going on, right? Well, we don't really want a lot of this. Some of it can be, so I will say, and when I say rare, it's super rare, and I'm talking out of 200 attempts on the same action 2 or 3 times, but rare instances of weird things happening, and it looked like primarily from what I could tell happening from the offset root bone, as well as a couple of other things. So to be able to get around even just those rare issues while still maintaining smoothness, what I found the best way to do is to disconnect the output pose here, pull off the result, and we're going to do a blend by bool. And then we're going to hook the pose here into true. Now, what we need to do, though, is give it the values. So we're going to create a new function inside of the animation blueprint here called set traversal variables. And then to be able to get that information, if we go into the variables tab here in the bottom, go to references, and then get the sandbox character, pull off and type in dynamic parkour. And then if we just scroll down to the bottom, you'll see get dynamic parkour trace system. Because what we want to do is we want to pull off of this and see if it is valid. This is just to help avoid any first frame execution errors when things are still loading. So that's just a recommended thing just to help with certain glitches. Now, once it is valid, what we're going to do is just pull off of this and get active climb style. because we're basically going to do the same thing we did to override the rotation. So we're going to go ahead and pull off and promote to a variable. And if it is valid, go ahead and set that information. So we'll compile and save, go back to our anim graph. Now from here, we're just going to get the active climb style variable that we just made, pull off, and see if enum equal. And if enum is equal to none, we're going to go ahead and do whatever the standard trajectory, pose information is. However, if it's false, meaning that we are, either doing a wall run, ledge, point, whatever, then we're just going to get a standard state machine and call this climb states. Because then from here, we can pull off on the entry, add a state, and climb state. Double click and open this up, pull off of the result, and blend by climb type. Whoops. And you'll see blend poses E_climb type. And then if we right click, we can add the ledge, point, free climb, and wall run just like before. So now essentially what's going to happen is that whenever we're doing a climbing type action, so like whether we're on a ledge and we're moving left and right, or we're wall running and it's doing a cycle animation, anything like that, it's going to go ahead and blend. You can use these blend values to blend in and out between them, and it'll also allow you to be able to use just the standard cycling animations while still using this amazing logic for like falling and landing and ground-based movements. But ultimately, these were the only changes that I found that I had to make. Now, there are some things that I did make some adjustments to in an update to the system, and these are more just to allow objects to be closer to the wall, and certain like more finer detections. But ultimately, there's nothing that's going to be ultimately breaking with the way that they set up things in the game animation sample project. It's just kind of overriding certain things. But once you go ahead and just add in your basic functions, add in your basic setup. From there, you can just kind of start going ham and start adding in actions, defining your motion warp windows. I do recommend looking at the debugging video. There's a few things there that might help you, because the motion warping inside of the game animation sample project, because of the way that things are so refined and smoothed out, can sometimes be a little bit tricky. But I put out some information in there to help better understand some principles and practices of debugging things when it comes to either motion warping or my system. But that's really it, guys. The integration is pretty straightforward. It's pretty much the same thing as anything else. Setting it up with anything else. So like if you watch the initial setup videos, but there's a couple of changes that you're going to want to make. Maybe putting things at the end here is maybe not the best practice, but it does work. Now, one other thing I do want to note as well. Under the climb states here, if we pull off, we do want to also add a default slot. Now, the reason for this is because the default slot in here is actually here in the middle. And because we're splicing it at the end output pose, that slot's no longer going to actually get calculated into things, meaning that your montages won't actually play. But as long as we add the default slot in there, it works just fine. Now, I am working on trying to figure out a best way to be able to fix those rare occurrences of things happening that were weird. And I will say, if you wanted to and just, see if you can maybe figure it out, if you go and just add it after the default, before the default slot. So basically, same thing here as we've got. The only difference being is that rather than putting it at the end, take where the default slot node is, kind of move things out a little bit, but then plug it in like this. Because then you don't need this extra default slot here, because it's being played into the default slot at the end. Because everything is always sequential. Like, it does whatever's over here first and then over to this way. So if I compile and save, now default slot's going to actually get calculated. But so is the offset root bone, the IK leg processes. So there's certain things that are going to maybe be an issue. Like I said, out of 200 attempts on a single action, I had 2 issues pop up. But other than that, they worked perfectly. So it's up to you, but ultimately, you can put it wherever you want. But I do not recommend putting it anywhere before this, or trying to work it into its own post database search, because you will find that there's going to be some weird things that are going to happen because of the way that Epic set things up inside of motion matching. Now, it's not saying they did anything wrong. It's just that their method of thinking, my method of thinking, 2 different code styles. You know what I mean? Everybody codes differently. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope this helped understand kind of the way to set things up. Again, I'm going to keep putting out more videos, keep updating the system, where I'm trying to make this like the absolute go-to for parkour. So hopefully we can make that happen. If you guys have any issues or find any more bugs or anything like that, as I always say, please reach out to me on Discord or, in the comments or something. I'm always happy to hear about any bugs because I want to get these fixed and then I can update, get everything going for you guys. But I'll see you guys in the next video, hopefully. But until then, stay tuned, stay animated.